Now, after months of speculation, Beto O'Rourke has jumped into the crowded Democratic race for president. Earlier this morning, the former Texas congressman sent out this message to his supporters.
Amy and I are happy to share with you that I'm running to serve you as the next president of the United States of America. This is a defining moment of truth for this country and for every single one of us.
O'Rourke is the 13th candidate to join the race on the Democratic side. He's launching his campaign with a 3-day tour of Iowa, the first state to vote in next year's campaign for the nomination. Ed O'Keefe is in Keokuk, Iowa, where O'Rourke is holding his first event as a candidate. So, Ed, we have Beto O'Rourke, famous throughout the country for losing his last race. That's not the only reason that he's famous. I mean, he's famous because though he lost his last race in Texas, he came very, very, very close to winning, and he raised a ton of money, but still he lost. So why do you believe, or why does he believe he can take that momentum and bring it to the national stage and actually win?
That's right. In politics, football, whatever it is a loss. But what was notable about his loss is that he only lost by about 3 points and was able to raise $80 million in the process, the largest sum of any U.S. Senate campaign. And it's that ability to raise money that terrifies the other presidential campaigns that have already started, or the folks still exploring the possibility of doing so. In my conversations with them, with activists, with voters across the country, he's the one name that always comes up, and he's the other one. He's the name that the other campaigns ask about. He now thinks he can take this to the national stage, in part because so much of his donor base, the small dollar donor base, is across the country. It's telling, Anne-Marie, that you could walk into a coffee shop in Arlington, Virginia, and maybe Arlington, Texas, and you would have seen a Beto for U.S. Senate shirt on the backs of somebody. This guy, for whatever reason, was able to transcend Democrats across the country and therefore has some notoriety, and probably enough to begin this campaign here this weekend in Iowa and see where things go. He starts here in tiny Keokuk and will work his way up the Mississippi River today. This is a corner of the state where Democrats in the past have done quite well, and in recent cycles have struggled to maintain their momentum, turn out enough voters, and it's part of the reason why Democrats in this state think that they narrowly lost the governor's race last year, because they couldn't turn out enough Democrats in this part of the state. So he wants to begin here, work his way north. He'll be here through Saturday to kick things off, and says that there will be a formal launch of his campaign back in El Paso at the end of the month.
So, Ed, how is that transcendence from local to national manifesting itself in the early polling?
So there was a poll taken over the weekend here in Iowa that put him in 5th place behind Joe Biden, who isn't even in the race yet, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Kamala Harris. If you're placing 5th in a poll this early, that's a pretty good spot to be in. He's trailed by guys like Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, Julian Castro. I think any of those right there in that middle, right behind him, are pretty comfortable still, because you don't have to be number one right now. You need to be number one about 11 months from now. And so that's a decent spot for him to begin in. And again, it's indicative of the fact that here in Iowa there are Democrats, very active Democrats, who are aware of him, saw what he was doing in Texas, probably contributed to his campaign, and are now eager to see him come here to the state and try to make magic happen.
So you said that, some of the other Democrats that are running, it sort of terrifies them the way he can raise money. But in general, what's been the response from the Democrats and the Republicans, for that matter?
Well, Republicans, remember, the president has been on to him for several months, and even went to El Paso last month for a rally in the midst of the debate over the border wall, and I think is inferred in tweets in the last few months that, you're going to run for president. I thought you had to win something before you actually ran for president, reminding people that he lost that Senate race last year. Again, Democrats across the country eager to see if what he did in Texas, light footprint, social media based, very little use of consultants and outside polling, mostly traveled the state on his own in his truck with 1 or 2 aides and usually a reporter, and almost made it happen. He says in an interview this morning with the El Paso Times newspaper, his hometown paper, that this time he is more likely to use potentially some consultants, some of that polling, because he understands that as a national operation it might require just a little more of that, and says that his campaign will be based in El Paso, saying that anyone who really wants to work for him has to be willing to move to the border city, and will include some other folks across the country. But again, it's been telling to me, guys, that over the last several months, you sit down, you talk to somebody with one of the other campaigns, you go through the competition, and one of the questions I always would ask is, what are you hearing about Beto? When is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? Do you think he could do it? is he really going to be able to raise that kind of money again? And so I think, they will watch very closely today. They will watch to see what his one-day fundraising haul is. Remember, the number to beat is north of $6.5 million, which is what Bernie Sanders raised in one day. And the other thing to remember, while he raised $80 million, and in one quarter last year he raised $38 million, again, an unheard of sum, he ended that campaign with less than $500,000 in the bank. He almost spent all of it. So he begins with less than $1 million. Elizabeth Warren has $12.5 in the bank. Kirsten Gillibrand has something like $10 or $8 million. Bernie Sanders is north of 14 between his Senate campaign, left over from the presidential, and what he's raised already. So O'Rourke knows he's got to make sure that he's raising money while at the same time hitting the trail, talking to voters here in Iowa and in the other states in the coming weeks.
Yep, he's got to ramp it up. Ed O'Keefe, thank you very much. CBS This Morning will meet with O'Rourke today for his only national TV interview about his decision to run for president. And you can watch that interview tomorrow on CBS This Morning.